All right, 1 second here. All right, so we'll go on to Pirke Avos. Again, we're on holding by Pirke Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, as it is known. Again, we're on holding by Pirke Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers. We are in chapter 2. We are in Mishna 16. That's part 28. I think we're part 29. Right, we're going to have part 30, part 30, 31, 32, I'm sure. The Mishnah says, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua and evil eye, evil inclination, hatred of other people, remove a person from this world. Now, we've been speaking the last number of weeks in Rabbeinu Yonah, again, about this evil eye, so to speak, about jealousy or causing other people to be jealous and why their file gets opened first. Right, but essentially, Rabbeinu Yonah says that it means obviously a person not happy with what they have. They see that, the friend has more money, they have better spouse, better kids, they have, go on vacations, do other things, cause them to be jealous, right? Cause them to be jealous and cause damage between themselves, their friends, and the experts. Rabbeinu Yonah says experts of nature would say that a person who desires that what their friend has, contaminates person's thoughts. All right, even psychologists would say, not that we're necessarily big into psychology here, or really care what psychologists say in general, but they may have a point here, and that is that the experts of nature would say that a person who desires everything or some things that the friend has contaminates their thoughts, right? Cause them to constantly think about what they don't have, right? So to speak, and they're jealous, and this is what the evil eye is all about, right? That they are jealous. They want things that they don't have or that they can't have, right? Destroys the person's body, makes them depressed, right? And can literally take them out of this world. So also it means that a person is looking into the bad and seeing what a person has and saying, why don't I have it? Right? So that may be the focus of what we may speak about tonight. And that is the ability to see the good, right? A person can look at the world. I mean, it's very easy today to look at the world and see the world as being bad, seeing the world as being, man's inhumanity to man, and what goes on. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, right? No one wants to help anyone else out. There's, crazy immoral issues, in the world. People don't know, what sex they are, et cetera, trying to convince people at a young age. Maybe they're in the wrong body, and all that. But, focusing on this part for a second, right? It's very, very easy. First of all, it's very easy to be cynical, right? It's very easy, to look at the world, in general, and we're very quick to criticize, whether it be, public officials, let's say, politicians, very easy to criticize them, right? In many ways, or anybody, right? Anybody. It's family, it could be friends, etc. We're very, very, it's very easy to look at the bad of a person because obviously we all have flaws, right? Everybody is flawed. All right, maybe some more than others, okay. But essentially, everybody's flawed. Now, if everybody's flawed, wouldn't it be easy in general? Wouldn't it be easy in general to find negative things about other people? Sure. Right? Especially if they're successful in whatever way, doesn't matter. Whatever way, maybe they got better looks. I don't know. They have more hair, right? Some of us wish we had hair. Okay. Right. But they could have what a person thinks they're lacking. Yeah, they've seen another person, let's say that they have. Very good. So the obvious question they could ask, and I'll say it's the right question, but an obvious question is, why don't I have that? In other words, I should also have that. Why should I be lacking in this thing? Right? That's the question a person would ask. And then what are they going to do? They are going to nitpick, and it might not be hard to do that. Finding fault with someone else is easy. It's much easier finding fault in yourself. Yeah, you can say, oh, this person does this bad, or he does that bad, or does the other thing, or who knows what. Right? In general, it's very easy to find a flaw in someone else. When it comes to us, okay, we'll admit we're not perfect. We'll admit, maybe we're a work in progress. Okay. But at the end of the day, what do I see? We are very good at answering for ourselves. We are very good at giving answers and saying why we're not so bad. But if we would look, we'll make it very easy. If we would look at someone else, let's say they do the same thing that you did to someone else, let's say, and they do it to you. Now, what are you doing? You're going to jump up and down. You're going to be screaming, wow, could you do that? That's insensitive. That's this. You come up with all kinds of things. Might be true. They might, every single one of them, right? Every single one of them may be true. Okay. But even if it's true, even if it's true, we have answers. We are going to have answers why it's okay. Say, no, it's not really so bad. You got to look at it this way. You got to look at it the other way. We don't want to look at ourselves being bad or being wrong. So we have 150,000 different excuses why that is, right? Why it's okay what we did. Now, if someone did it to you, you're not letting them off the hook. You're saying, why'd you do this? Should have done that, whatever. You're wrong over here. Again, let's say it's true. They're also going to have excuses. I'm not going to say they're good excuses or bad excuses. They have excuses also. So even if they have excuses, we're going to accept it, right? It's always interesting. You learn something. Now it could be theoretical, it could be more practical. But when you learn something, and now it hits you right in the heart. I'll give an example. I remember many years ago learning certain Gemara is about what we call hezekriya. Someone, let's say, literally it means damage by seeing. What is it? What does that mean? It means someone, let's say, built an extension on their house or apartment, whatever. They block your light. They block lights coming in, let's say to your living room. Or they block some other area when they're building. So that's called causing damage, right? Because you didn't buy a house or in order that someone could look straight into your living room, right? No one necessarily is going to do that. So I remember I was sitting in the basement once, and a case came in that someone added an extension to their home, and the other person said, I never allowed you to build this so you could see in my living room, right? In other words, however they built the extension, they were able to see directly in this guy's living room. So what are you talking about? You signed a document allowing me to build. So yeah, there were two sets of documents. That wasn't one of them, right? In other words, there was another document, that was signed doing other things. Okay, that didn't affect it, or he didn't care. Very good. So what? So if he didn't care, doesn't make any difference. Yeah. So they say, but you signed. You signed that you allowed it. So one of the rabbinical court judges, gets up and says, "Listen, if I were to sign, if I were to build, and I could see straight into your living room, would you let me build?" So what did the guy answer? He said, "He did. He allowed me to do it. Why would somebody do that? Why in the world would somebody do that? Right? Obviously, he was lying. Right? So somebody was lying over here. Right? So this happened to be, this happened to be no gay to me, meaning that I was learning that, let's say someone builds an extension, or let's say someone puts out a pipe that goes into your garden. So I was living on a ground floor. So I had 4 pipes going into my garden, meaning that these were pipes where if someone, cleaned their floors, so that water would go into my garden. Yeah, it wasn't, let's say the cleanest water, right? Let's say. But I couldn't do anything about it because, since I bought the apartment, so that was already done. It was already done. I had no say in it. Even if I would have been there when they did it, I wouldn't have allowed it. It doesn't matter. The fact is, whoever lived there before, or whoever lived there first when it happened, didn't say anything. So, you can't do anything. There's nothing you can do. So what happened over here? So I saw that someone, a number of flights above, I saw, one day there's a pipe going down from their apartment. That's also going to go into my garden. So at that point, this is what I was learning. I was like, so I looked it up. But when something is, it's going to affect you, you learn it much stronger, right? So what do you? So I saw that if you don't protest straight away, they can say, it didn't bother you. I put it up, it didn't bother you. You can't say anything, right? So I went upstairs, right, told the person, hi, how are you? Whatever, get that pipe out. I said, that pipe ain't going into my garden. I stopped it, right? I said, I don't care where it goes, it ain't going there, right? You got to move it, right? So I had no choice. You had to move it. Okay. Wherever he moved it, it doesn't matter. It did not go, into my garden. The point was that if you don't say straight away, right? If you don't say straight away, the person has to move it or take it down, whatever it is. Then that person has the right to say, it didn't bother you. You didn't protest. You got to protest like straight away. You got a certain amount of time, right? But if you don't protest, what happens? So then that stays. So, it's like anything else. You're learning something, and now it hits you right in the heart. Now you have to say, okay, why is this thing forbidden? Right? Why is this forbidden? Because you want it to be permitted, right? This comes to play in the case of what we're talking about, right? Because what does the Mishnah say? What does the Mishnah say here? The Mishnah says there are 3 things. There are 3 things that, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, 3 things take you out from this world. Remove a person from this world. One of them is an evil eye. Now, a person, let's say a person is causing someone damage. They're causing someone damage. So they're causing a person damage. So what do? So they pray that God takes it away. They'll pray that, that God should stop it, right? I'm not even going to say to die. That'd be worse, right? That'd be worse. Now, what happens? This person is causing damage, right? They call whatever damage it is, doesn't matter. Whether it's physical damage, whether psychological damage, whatever damage it is, it's bad, right? It's causing you agmas nefesh. It's causing you, to get angry. We have a right to get angry, maybe, right? We'll see. So this person is bothering you, right? That's better way to put it. The person's bothering you. So what do? You pray to God and you say, get this person to stop bothering me. You can say, you're the one in charge, right? You can do anything. It's me and you in the world. Very good. Say, stop him. This is causing me pain. Now, what happens at that point? At that point, we mentioned, way back, what happened? Your file gets opened first. God's going to open your file, right? He's going to look at your actions and see, do you have a valid cause? The only time you ever want your file opened is on Rosh Hashanah, right? 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, everywhere in the world, God judges the entire world, right? Non-Jews don't necessarily know that. God judges each individual, Jew and non-Jew, and he judges the world in general. Very good. That's the only time you ever want your file open. Because if God opens up your file during a regular day during the year, what happened over here? Person's in pain. Person's in pain. Now, doesn't God know the source of the pain? Yeah. God knows past, present, future. He knows the source of your pain. Okay. But the fact that a person's in pain, God has to see is, does this person have a legitimate right? Do they have a legitimate cause over here? But God's going to open your file and see. He doesn't have to do that. He knows already. Very good. But he's going to investigate. He's going to investigate. He's going to look at it and see, do you have what you're saying? Is it true or not true? Now, let's say, for argument's sake, it is true. Okay. Yeah, so the other person's causing him pain. So now we talked about the evil eye before. That person will get punished because he's causing pain. Right? That file will be open. Right? That person's file will be open. Now who's going to pass that test? God's going to, test the person to find two stones. Very good. So that's one case. Someone caused someone else pain. Person's in pain. God looks at the other person and says, well, is he really causing him pain or not? And if he's not, and the other person's exaggerating, he won't get punished. If the person isn't exaggerating, he will get punished. Okay. What if someone's bothering us? Let's say person's being bothered. And he prays and he says, God, I want you to take care of this. I want you to take care of this person. Now, that doesn't mean the person should die. You're not calling, we'll make it easy. He's not calling for the person to die. Yeah? He wants the person to be taken care of. He wants the person, or the very least, he wants the person to stop bothering. That's what he wants. He wants the person to stop bothering. Okay. Fair enough. What's God going to do? Now, what's the problem? Right? Is there a problem over here? We say God will judge it. And God will see, is the person really bothering them or not? And then he'll judge it as he sees. Right? As he sees it. Right? He'll judge it. Very good. What's the problem here? A person is praying that God should take care of it. That God should get this person to stop bothering him. Not you're praying, God should kill him. God should injure them. Right? But a person prays that God should take him out of your misery. Right? To have you stop bothering him. Right? That he should stop bothering you. Very good. What's the problem? Why, in this case, does the person who's crying out to God to get this person to stop bothering him, why is his file open first? Why would his file be open first? Why is God going to scrutinize? Because he wants God to punish the other person. If he wants God to punish the other person, right, doesn't he have to look, well, let's see, what's the other person doing? That would be obvious. You look into the other person's file. You don't look into your own file. Why is God got to look into your file first? Yeah, now, if someone's really bothering us, and this is what we want God, quote unquote, to take care of business. What's going to happen? He's going to open your file first. Now, anyone's ever been in such a situation? Yeah. they're going to ask the $1 million question, on this Gemara. And the $1 million question is, why in the world should your file be open first? That's the $1 million question. You didn't do anything wrong. You want this person to stop bothering. It's not like you're asking God, kill him, throw him off a cliff, punish him. You're not asking him for that. You're asking him to have him stop bothering you. So why does your file get opened first? Open the other guy's file first. See if he's really bothering him or not. Even though God already knows. Doesn't matter. The Gemara says, what's going to happen? Your file gets opened first. Why? Why in the world? Does that have to be understood? Right? You can't just read. Just can't read it like a newspaper. It has to be understood. Why would the rabbi say that this person's file gets opened first? Meaning you. Why does the other person's file get opened? Right? Face value. Very hard to understand. Right? You would obviously say you didn't do anything wrong. Which is going to be a problem, but we'll see that in a second. Right? But you're saying this other person deserves to be punished. Now, if God agrees, okay, that person will get punished. Very good. But why does your file get opened first? Why is he not looking at the other person? Because you got a claim. You're making a claim. Now, God already knows it. It doesn't matter. You're making this claim. You're praying, saying, take this person out of my life. Or get this person to stop bothering. Whatever it is. Right? What essentially are you saying to God? What exactly are you praying over here? You're praying that God's not doing his job. That's essentially what you're saying. The lack of emunah. It's a lack of faith and belief in God. Why? If someone's bothering you, the Chosel Avos says, someone caused you damage, he says in the gate of B'tachon, gate of faith and belief in God, what's he telling you? Right? God's using that person to get to you. Very good. Doesn't that person have free will? It's like a person hits a dog with a stick. Who does the dog go after? The stick. He's not going after the person wielding the power of the stick. Right? So the dog, is running after the stick. Very good. Right? Or maybe not so good. Doesn't matter. It's a dog's instinct. And we do the same thing. This person's bothering us. So we're going to say, God, take care of them. Well, isn't God sending them to give us a message? He's sending them to give us a message. Very good. But is that person guilty? Let's say they caused us damage. If God's sending them, we would say there are a lot of messengers God has, right? This person's taking up the charge. It's not like God, God's got a lot of messengers. Someone's going to rise to the occasion. Yeah? This person rises to the occasion, says, I'm going to do it. Okay, but guilty. He's got free choice. God's not forcing him. Someone else can come up and do it. Okay. Now the question is, this person comes to you. This person, let's say, causes you damage. Very good. So this person causes you damage. Is he guilty? 100%. 100% guilty. Right? God's going to punish them for damaging you. Very good. But isn't God, he's the one that came. But God used him. Obviously, if a person wasn't guilty of something, this wouldn't have happened. Right? It never would have happened. So why did it happen? Sin. So God's sending you a message through this person. Very good. But the person has free choice. So if the person has free choice, right? If the person has free choice, yeah, so why are they punished? God sent them? No. They took it upon themselves. They have free choice. That's why they're going to get punished. But again, what's the point? The point is, God's using that person to get to us. But essentially, what are we saying? What are we praying over here? We are praying and saying, God, I want you to take care of this person. Right? Let's say in the middle of the blessing, the Shemona Esrei, silent meditation, whatever you want to call it, right? The blessing of God's judgment. Bring God's judgment revealed back to the world. So in that blessing, you have intention, God, take care of this person. Get this person out of my life. Take him out of my misery. Yeah, don't kill him, injure. It doesn't matter. Don't injure him, whatever. Just do something. It doesn't bother. Yeah. What's the problem? Problem is, one potential answer is that you don't believe God's in charge. You don't believe God runs the world. In other words, the person 100% is guilty. Guilty is charged. Nothing to talk about. But didn't God allow him to do it? God allowed him to do it. Right? So therefore, a person must have sinned in order to receive this punishment, whatever he's getting, or whatever she's getting. Very good. The only problem is, you're going to say, God, take care of business. I want you to take this person out of my life. I want you to get him to stop bothering me. You're going to say, isn't that a natural response? Everyone would agree, most likely, it's a natural response. 100% is a natural response. But we're not talking about natural responses. We're talking about how God wants me to live my life. That's what we're talking about. So if a person cries out to God and says, I want you to take care of this person, and your file now gets open to see if you have a legitimate claim or not, why in the world, right, is your file being open? Open the other guy's file. See what he's doing. So why does it work the opposite? So why the rabbis say your file is going to be open first? Obviously, they knew what they're talking about. They knew the psyche of man. They weren't stupid by any stretch. God forbid. They understood. They understood the psyche of man. Very good. So why does your file get open? One possible reason. Your file gets open first because you're telling God, essentially, you're not doing your job. The lack of emunah. The lack of having proper faith in God. Again, this person to us is like the stick. So you're running, you're yelling and screaming at the stick, which, again, if they cause damage, you have every right to. But you're also missing the point. Even if the person's guilty, you got to see the bigger picture, as we always say. So what's the bigger picture over here? The bigger picture is that God allowed this to happen. That's the bigger picture. So now you're telling God you're doing it wrong. I don't deserve it. What do you mean you don't deserve it? Nothing happens for no reason. Right? The Gemara says, obviously, nothing happens for no reason. Right? If you can't find a reason, which would be impossible today, for most people, if you can't find the reason, we could probably say it's Bittul Torah. For a guy, it's wasting time when he could have learned Torah. Yeah. If that wasn't the case, why a person's getting punished, then the Gemara says maybe it's what we call Yisurim Sha'av. It's talking about suffering because God loves you. If He loves you, why would you make you suffer? Yeah. Why would that be the case? In order that in the next world comes squeaky clean, right? You won't have to suffer in the next world. So you suffer in this world for whatever, even something very minor. You'll suffer in this world. You won't have to suffer in the next world. Very good. But no one wants to suffer anyway, right? No one's interested in suffering. Very good. But if we knew how much suffering took away from our sins, we take more suffering, but nobody wants it. Okay. But based on that, what do I have? I have the fact that a person is going to say, this person caused me damage, right? This person caused me damage. And let's say we're right. There's no question. They have no excuse. They may have their own excuses, but essentially they have no excuse. 100% guilty. Good. Doesn't matter why. They're guilty. So they're going to get taken care of. Okay. Now, if this prolongs and it doesn't get taken care of, let's say, person seemingly getting away with things, and the other person is suffering, the other person's crying out and says, I don't want to suffer. I don't want to suffer anymore. Take this off me. Very good. But you caused it. You caused it yourself. If you caused it yourself, you don't have any excuses there. You caused it, but it's a different issue. The issue over here is as if to say God's not doing His job, which is a lack of emunah, the lack of faith and belief in God that he runs the world. And that's worse. That is worse. So God's going to open. So one possible explanation is God is going to open your file first. He's going to open your file and see if you have a complaint or not. You're going to say it's not fair. Look what he's doing, right? But at the same time, what's he going to say? Right? I put on my funny George Burns glasses, my funny mustache. If I were God, what would I say? You don't think I'm doing my job? You don't think I know what I'm doing? You don't think I see what's going on? I see what's going on. And his answer will be, I will take care of this person. You have nothing to worry about. But that doesn't give you the right to pray that I should take care of it, as if to say, I don't know what I'm doing. As if to say, I'm not doing my job. That's kind of hard to say, right? I would say impossible to say. So essentially, I have a person complaining without having proper faith and belief in God. That's what it is. So then, person going to say, okay, I understand this is, this is to my betterment. I'm supposed to be a better person going through this. Very good. What's the problem? It's hard. Nobody wants to go through pain. Nobody wants to suffer. Okay. So this person is the conduit to make you suffer. And we've come in contact with a lot of people that, nobody likes it. Nobody wants it. But we're not looking at the real problem. The real problem is you must have done something to deserve it. Nobody's perfect. At the end of the day, it could be we've done something wrong. It could be it's something our soul has to go through. Right? What we call reincarnation. Could be. I wouldn't necessarily hang my hat on it because we don't know. We for sure don't know. But I think for a lot of things, that we go through, it has nothing to do with what my soul's doing in the world and what it's here to fix up. And nothing to do with it. It has to do with the fact that you did something wrong. It could have been something 2 weeks ago, could have been a month ago, could have been 5 years ago. God says, finally, okay, I've had enough patience. You haven't got the message. I'm going to give it to you now. And the question always comes up. I hear this question all the time. People say, I'm going through this, I'm going through that. I want to know what the measure for measure is, right? Because God judges us measure for measure, right? Whatever we're going through, it's something we've done measure for measure, right? So my answer always is, God, Moshe Rabbeinu says to God, I want to see your face. Meaning, I want to understand how the world works in your eyes. Yeah, in other words, why people go through what they do, this and that. So what does God say? Right, an explicit verse, book of Exodus. What does God say? Nobody can see my face and live. So God says you can always see me from behind. What does it mean to see me from behind? It means you can only see things in hindsight. You cannot see things at face value. There are many, I mentioned this many times. There are many, many, many things we see. We don't have a clue of what we're seeing. If God, I'm convinced, beyond the shadow of a doubt, if God would open our eyes for a split second, for one split second and show us what's going on and why, we'd probably die of a heart attack. We have no idea. One of the rabbis went up to heaven, the Gemara says, they asked him, what'd you see? So he says, I saw an upside down world. Right? I saw, people in this world that are doing very well. They ain't doing so well in the next world. I saw people that were having a hard time in this world. They're doing much better in the next world. Right? So what we see, we don't fathom. I can give a million examples of it, but what we see, we don't understand. So, so what do we take out from this? I mean, it's kind of depressing because, anyone who wants to convert and, or, a secular Jew who wants to become religious, it's not an easy subject. It's not an easy thing. Family may give you a problem. Financially, a person may have problems. They can't move. let's say to a Jewish community, probably single biggest problem for most people. They can't move, right? Or they have all kinds of hardships, tremendous amount of hardships. So the question that comes up very often, very, very often is either I must be the biggest loser in the world, that no one wants to accept me, and no one wants to get back to me. I email people, I call people, no one answers this, that. It's frustrating. Okay. Now, if you're calling, let's say, rabbi or rabbinical court, at times where, right before a Passover, or let's say, right by the high holidays or close to that, they're not going to answer you. They're busy, right? It's normal, right? It's a normal thing to be very busy, can't get back to you. Now, if they have a chance, could they call you or send you an email, say, listen, we're very busy, contact me, right after the holidays, we'll be in touch. Okay. Maybe that's common courtesy. You might say that, but people are flooded. They're just flooded in general, busy. Some may do it to test your mettle. That might be the case, right? Or to test the person. I had somebody contact me once many years ago. They said, listen, I've called, I've emailed and called like 14 different rabbis, 10 different rabbinical courts. You're the only one that answered me. Now, I don't know what that says about everyone else or what that says about me. Yeah, maybe a little more time on my hands. Maybe, I don't know. Whatever it is. But, it's all a test. I understand people get frustrated. People say, I've been in this process for a long time. I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. No one's really answering me. Okay, you have to be strong as a rock in Gibraltar. That's what you have to be, right? You don't take no for an answer. You keep coming. You keep showing that you're serious, whatever, right? But, a person has to understand, as well, is that it's going to take time to be accepted. It's going to take time. It makes sense. Also, someone's going to be a sponsoring rabbi. He's not going to be a sponsoring rabbi straight away. They have to get to know you, to see if you're real. Most people flake out. They don't end up converting. Less than 20% end up converting. So it's not like a straight up process. Meet a rabbi for the first time. Say, oh, you sponsor me? Of course, they're not going to sponsor you straight away. They don't know who you are. Most people flake out anyway, right? In general, for a lot of different reasons. Doesn't matter. So it's a frustrating process. Yes, can be a very frustrating process. I don't think it has to be so frustrating, but it can be. 100% it can be. Okay. So what do? You can feel bad about it. You can say, hey, no one wants to help me. You can say, it's not fair. Remember one thing, right? Remember one thing. And I say this all the time. One thing you remember for anything I say is life is not about what's fair, right? You got to repeat that and say it like 1,000 times, right? It had nothing to do with being fair or not. God calls it the way he sees it. Some people have an easier time. Some people have a harder time. Some people seem to have an impossible time. Depends what they go through. It depends what they have to go through. Now, someone can say, I know more than this person. I know more than that person, which may be true. But I'm not being converted. They're not helping me, whatever. The question is why? That's the question. Now, again, all of this is what? Part of the test. Right? It's all part of the test. I'm not saying that's the only reason, that a person may have hardship, but it is part of the test. Their mettle will be tested. Their patience will be tested. I would tell people it's better, it takes longer to convert than not, because they have to know what they're doing. I'm not saying they're going to know every nook and cranny of everything they learn, not going that far, right? But I would say beyond the shadow of a doubt, what's going to happen is they're going to have hardship. Everybody's going to have hardship, right? No one gets off easy, right? At all. Some people have it harder, some people not. It depends what it is. But what happens over here, right? When did that, what's going on? It's a question of what a person goes through, right? That's what it is. That's what it's going to depend on. Again, So this fits in exactly what the Mishnah says. I'm not looking, or anyone should have been looking what someone else has, or what someone else goes, or anything else. That is not the point. That is exactly not the point. The point is you go through X, Y, or Z. Okay. So that's for you. Other people may go through the same thing. They may go through, less things. They go through more things. Everyone according to whatever they have to go through. But nobody should ever be looking at anyone else. That is the point. Right? When you start looking at other things and other people, and then you start complaining, this is exactly what the Gemara says. You start complaining to God, this isn't fair, that's not fair, the other thing's not fair. God's going to open your file first. But it's a lack of emunah. As if to say, I'm getting this, it's not my fault. I'll give everybody homework, very hard homework. And the homework is, before you go to sleep, unless you're like totally exhausted, your head is the pillow, you don't get a chance to do this. Before you go to sleep, think about the day. Think about what you did, how you spoke to others. Think about how you served God at whatever level. Think about these things before you go to sleep. And then imagine without, being honest, did you pass the test? If God was scrutinizing you, where were your thoughts? How'd you interact with others? What were your interactions between you and God in general? What you're obligated to do for God? The problem is, Pirke Avos says, it says in Duties of the Heart, we don't do a third, a quarter, or a half of what we're supposed to do. So, that answer is, well, no, we didn't succeed. Okay. But if, a person will really understand where they're holding, it could be very depressing. But if a person takes note of what happened and what's going on, yeah, you're really going to pass the test 100%. Everyone's going to say, I've done everything in my power and I'm holding somewhere in the world, right? Let's say, they're going to be that brutally honest. I have a hard time imagining, right? I have a hard time imagining that that's going to be the case. Yeah, but no one wants to admit that. No one in the right mind wants to say, I'm not doing okay. I'm doing better than, most people, even if it's true. Where are you holding in the world? What does God want from you? What does he expect? That's taking an honest account, right? An honest self-account. So the way it's going to work over here is that a person is going to, when they get judged, so to speak, the question is going to be, why are you looking at me? God says. Yeah, why are you saying I'm not doing my job? This person, we don't have to worry. God says, I'll take care of them. You have nothing to worry about. I'll take care of them in this world, next world, both worlds. Doesn't matter. I will take care of business. Very good. So if I'm going to take care of business, right? If God's going to take care of business, then you're not questioning him because you don't know how the world works in his eyes. What we see, we don't understand. We understand nothing. Nothing. Right? We understand less than nothing. But everyone thinks, oh, I know this, I know that, I know the other. Like, really? Come on. If you're honest, either you're going to say that, I'm being treated unfairly by God. That's what you're going to say. Or you'll say, or you say he doesn't know what he's doing. It's not right. It's not fair. But if he knows past, present, and future, and he's keeping everything together like the Matrix, then it's hard to say that. Right? But nobody at the same time wants to take responsibility. We want to think we're good in our own eyes. Okay. In our own eyes. But if you're honest, that's the problem. We're not so honest. Right? If we'd be totally honest, how do we view it? How are we supposed to see it? Yeah. This is a problem. This is an absolute problem because we don't want to see ourselves in a bad light. Nobody, right? You have to have a certain level, self-esteem, right? No question. But I would say like this, that, we have an obligation to be honest. If we're brutally honest, you never get out of bed, right? There are 1.5 million things we have to be thankful for. Yeah. But guess what? God runs the world. He's in charge. It's the way we look at things. So if that's the case, and he knows past, present, future, you can't hide from it. Right? So he knows, he's calculating, everything's measured for measure. But again, everybody and their mother wants to know what's the measure for measure. That's what everyone wants to know. And that's hard. Not only is it hard, it's impossible. But again, it's not about what's fair or not fair. There are things, listen, we can mess up ourselves. There could be certain situations. There are definitely going to be certain situations. People don't want to hear, right? Somebody went to, want to go to Jewish community. And, I tell everybody the same thing. If you have kids and they want to go to, you want to send them to Jewish school, this school may not take them before conversion. Said that 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. They may not. There are schools that will. Very good. Yeah, they're willing to take people if they're set by a rabbinical court, let's say. They'll take them before conversion. Okay. But some won't. I made this very clear. I always make it very clear. Person came back and said, this looks really bad. They should have accepted my kids. And I'm trying this and they should. I told you there are places that will not accept them. Doesn't matter. That's their policy. You can say it's a racist policy. Okay. Yeah, it's a Jewish school, not a school for non-Jews. Even if they're in the process of conversion. Now, other people look at it differently. They'll say if in the process of conversion this serious, we'll accept them. Yeah. So some will, some won't. But don't say, I didn't warn you. You're not coming back and putting me on the spot. I told you. That could happen. But it's not right, and it has nothing to do with being right or not. That's what they hold. And that's what most schools hold. You want to hold it against them, hold it against them in your situation. Okay. Yeah. But it's not like you never heard such a thing. Right? It's not like it's just like, stam machshava ba'avira. It's not like, just a general thought in the air. It's like, oh, never happened. What do you mean never happened? My job to warn people these things. These are things people have to know. Could happen. Yeah, it could happen. And if it doesn't happen, your kids are accepted. Great. And if they're not, and that's their policy. That's their policy. What do you want from me? What do you want from the Jewish community? That's what they own. It makes sense. I know someone whose kids were accepted in the school. Before conversion, the kids had no play dates. Maybe it's not the end of the world, but like everyone's looking at them. They're not, they're with us. They're not really with us. They're not Jewish. They bring all kinds of baggage with them. Not being Jewish, no offense. So like until they're accepted, meaning until they're converted, I want them in my house. I don't want them hanging out with my kids. They can be good kids. I'm not saying not. But they want to protect their kids. The kids aren't Jewish. Makes sense. Doesn't make sense. I'm not saying 100% is right. It makes sense. So I asked this person after conversion. They said it was easier. A lot easier. But again, people have to know the reality situation. People think, oh, that's racist. It's terrible. That's what it is. Not saying no. That's what it is. Some places will accept, some places won't. But you can't come back and say, well, the school didn't accept me. Okay, it's understandable why. Not saying that's anything to do with your kids. There's a policy. There's a policy. Yeah, and school has certain policies and other things. Whether right, wrong, or indifferent, that's their policy. That's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to do. You may think it's not right, it's not there. Okay. But if they're doing it with everybody else, And that's their policy. They're not singling out non-Jews. Right? Don't make that mistake. Oh, it's discrimination. It's not discrimination. They hold this across the board, whatever it is. They hold it across the board. So what's the problem? You don't like it. Okay. Then do something else about it. But it's not discrimination. They're not discriminating here. If they held different standards for different people, and some people yes, some people no, and they holding different things, that's a different issue. But if they're consistent, again, regardless of whether you agree or not, doesn't really matter. If that is what they do, that's not discrimination. Yeah, let me take some questions here. Someone asked, is it best to the person ourselves, even if we avoid them? Why do you have to tell them? I don't know if you have to tell them. I don't say you have to tell them. They're causing you damage. You avoid them. Okay. I mean, you can confront them. Question is it going to help anything? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll make it worse. Yeah. If the person pretends to not understand, yeah, and they're putting people out there, that's like talking to a brick. Yeah, try and talk to someone who's narcissistic. Yeah, good luck. You're never going to get anywhere. You have to understand that they're not holding anywhere in the world, and that no matter what you say, it doesn't matter because they're in their own world. So someone who's in their own world, you're gonna try and convince them? I don't know. How are you gonna convince them? Right? If they pretend to not understand, and so you're telling me they really understand? Yeah. If they pretend not to understand, so you can make the point again. If they say, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about," whatever, you move on. You can make it very clear, and they say, "I'm not doing that." They can deny it also. 100% they could deny it. But let's say you pin them down. Let's say, you back them in a corner. Then they have to admit, okay. But I don't know it's going to change anything. I would say like this, if they pretend not to understand, they continue, then yeah, you got to walk away. 100% you got to walk away. Bigger person will walk away. But yeah, it's painful. But some people you can't deal with. You can't talk to. Whether they're doing it on purpose or not. Yeah, is it that you're not asking the person to stop aggressively? I don't know, even if you did, right? Even if you would try and convince them, and you made it very explicit, right? According to everybody, yeah, according to all sides, you've made it very explicit, let's say, and they ignore it, or they don't think that's the case, right? What if they pretend to have mental health issues? So what do? Let's say they don't have, and they want to say, there's something wrong with them. Okay. Yeah, so what do? I would think the obvious thing to do is just ignore it. Yeah, that's the only thing you can do. I mean, it's like talking to a brick. They'll never admit. Not only won't they admit, but it's not going to change anything. Maybe it'll make it worse. Right? I mean, sometimes you have to confront the situation. Right? 100%. Try and get, people to stop certain things. Sometimes you have to. Yeah. Sometimes ignoring it won't help. Yeah, if you confront it, it could be worse. Could make it worse. Okay, I'm not saying not to. But someone's pretending, but they really know. Let's say they really know. So you're talking to someone who's not going to change. They're not interested in change. They're going to continue doing the same thing or worse. So what do? What does a person do, God forbid, if they have cancer? You burn it out. That's what you do. Get rid of it. It's the only thing you can do. What if you can't get rid of it? So you have to deal with it somehow. Right? You have to ignore it. That's what, and a lot of these relationships go by the wayside, as they should. Because all it does is just cause more pain. Right? So there's no point. There's absolutely no point. That's what I would say on that. Um, Someone asked, what am I doing to attract people who feel like the soul is a spider? I can't answer, but I can only say that all these things, all these things are, are a test. There are people out there that, again, I'm not going to say about everybody or say what a percentage is, but, there are people out there that are just weird. They're weird, they're strange, in different ways. Some people would say, I seem to attract all the weird ones. Well, it's probably not true. Right? I'm probably sure there are some that, are normal that a person, could attract. But again, we live in a wacky world. We live in a definitely, a wacky world. And, sometimes we come in contact with people that are not pleasant to be in contact with, whatever reason. But again, is a person walks into a store, is busy. Yeah, let's say, you want to get out pretty quick and you're stuck with a cashier that's, let's just say it's a little bit slow. To be general, I'm not saying slow in the mind per se. It's just slow. What are you gonna do? You can't switch. You're stuck. This, that. It's Murphy's law. Yeah, it's Murphy's law. So what happens? You're in a rush, got to get things done. You wish this person worked faster. They don't. But you're stuck now. What do you do? What do you do? So it's work on your patience. That's what it is. That's what it is. You're quote unquote in the wrong line. That's the test. Is the person going to be patient? I got this to do, that to be somewhere else in 10 minutes. It's going to take me 20 minutes. I'm going to be late. This. Okay. Right? But you have to be there. You have to be there. And what if like 3 out of the 4 people you can check out with, they're all slow? 3 out of 4, let's say. You're stuck. You're definitely stuck. Isn't, Murphy's Law, person's in a rush and someone in front of you is going, 10 miles an hour. 20 miles an hour, you can't pass them. Isn't that annoying? You're in a rush, you need to get somewhere? Of course it's annoying. No one's not going to say they're not annoying. Yeah, I mean, unless you're absolutely righteous, right? But you're in a rush. You got other things on your mind. You got other things to do. You can't sit behind this person. But you can't pass them. Be dangerous. Yeah. Not to mention, you probably get fined if you got caught. Yeah, you can't pass them. You're stuck. So what's the first thing going off in your mind? Why am I stuck behind this person? Why am I stuck in this lane? Now, some people have bad driving habits. Okay. I'm saying, let's say it's not the case. Let's say all of a sudden the lane you got in stuck. Yeah, it's slow. You can't pass anyone, whatever. You're going to say, why did it happen? It's not fair. What's part of the test? What essentially is part of the test? What's part of the test is how you're going to react. You can still stay aggravated, right? 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 It's a test. Some people have easier time with this, other people don't. Right? Fair, it's not fair. It's what people go through. It's exactly what people go through on a normal basis. You got to say, I get this test more than anyone else. I don't know. You take a survey. Is that really true? I don't think it's true. I don't think it's true. I think a lot of things could be some things we may bring on ourselves. Could very well be. Could very well be. But let's say not. Let's say not that way. You're in this situation now. So what do you do? What's the test? Right? What's the answers? Test on my self-awareness. Test on patience, which doesn't exist. In an Israeli dictionary. It does not exist. Right? You're a red light. Okay, you can't go anywhere. Now, before it turns green, it turns red yellow. Right? So that's what happens here in Israel. It turns red yellow. It has not turned green. People are already honking. But you can't go anywhere. Meanwhile, you're not at the front, let's say. You're behind 2 other people, and people behind you are honking. Well, what would they like you to do? I say this all the time. Where should we go? I should hit the person in front of me. What should I do? What in the world should you do? Patience. Nobody wants to work on patience. Yeah, especially here. Everyone's got, places to go and do things. What? I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have anything to do. Why is everyone else like more important for them than for me? I was, you take, let's say that, in the winter, Shabbos comes in very early, right? So you want to go to the store, right? Let's say, you're finding, someone double parks, right? I can't imagine it's ever happening. Someone double parks. Yeah. So now buses can't get around. You can't get around. Like you're stuck because this person double parked. Now it's going to cost you an extra few minutes, but Shabbos comes in at like 4:00, 4:15. So like everyone's like rushing around. Very good. So, so what's the excuse the guy's going to make? Or the woman's going to make? What's the problem? I was only in for 5 minutes. I was only there for 2 minutes. Everyone's going to say the same thing. I'm not saying you get boxed in. Everyone's going to say the exact same thing. I only need a few more minutes. You know what? Your time's more important than mine. Or you go like in a little side street, which I always go on, and there are people that are parked there. Only one, people have to go out or people have to come in. Yeah, they're stuck. They're absolutely stuck. One has to either back up, so the other person can get in or get out. Why is that person parked there? What's the reason? What's their mentality? I'll tell you. They're only going to be there for a few minutes. It's not going to hurt anyone. What's the big deal? People get in and out, even though I parked there. But they're causing other people to wait. So their time is more valuable than mine. Isn't that common courtesy? Wouldn't everyone say it's common courtesy? I would think. Why do some people do that? So, I don't know answer these type of questions, right? But why do some people do it? Why would I say some people do it? It's one or two things. Either they don't have a clue about common courtesy, they were taught it, or they don't care. It's one or the other. It's one or the other. Again, I'm not saying these people are evil per se, but why is their time more valuable than mine? What do I care who they are? Doesn't matter. Why is their time more valuable? They have the right to block off a place and, cause traffic problems because they're only going to be there, quote unquote, 5 minutes. Yeah. Even if it's true, even if they're there for 2 minutes, but people can't get in and out properly. So again, it seems they don't care, which is probably the case. Right? Even by the best of people. Right? Or they were never taught common courtesy. Yeah. You got to say, how could a person not be taught common courtesy? You want that answer? One of my personal pet peeves, is hygiene, personal hygiene. Yeah. People can cough and sneeze all over the place. They don't cover their mouths. Why not? So either it's not important to them or they don't care. Or it's the same thing. Or they were never taught. It's one or the other. But sometimes I see pretty important people. I'm like, you don't have a clue, right? Dying to say something, I won't. Maybe one day, I don't know. But it's obvious. All the Torah you learned, what's it worth? You don't have common sense, common courtesy. Again, not all the time you have to say something. Sometimes you might have to. Right? I would love to say things to some people. Love to, but I don't. I don't think it's going to be listened to. And B, I think I just get this look like you're out of your mind. Like you're totally out of your mind. So I have to teach crazy people. Got enough crazy people to deal with. Yeah. I have to teach, I have to teach other people that should know better. I don't have to give the benefit of the doubt over here. Again, if they were never taught it, and it was never a value, I don't know. This is common sense. Even if they weren't taught it. Even if they weren't taught it. I had a discussion with somebody once a while ago. I'm not going to go into detail what the person said about somebody, whatever. And it basically came out, people don't care. They don't care about other people. I mean, you want to know why the temple has been rebuilt? Man's inhumanity to man. I'm not talking killing people, whatever. It goes without saying. I'm saying common courtesy. This is something hunters have to know. It's a common courtesy. You're not going to die if they don't do it, but, it's universal. Should be. Some people never got the message. Yeah, I read the story once. Someone comes in to give a class. And a guy was brilliant. Brilliant. And this guy looked like a slump. There's no other way to say it. I'm being very generous. Guy looked unkempt, looked like an absolute slump. Slump! Get what he's been through. Look like a slump. How can you take someone seriously if they look like a slump? I'm not saying, to be totally, impeccable, that they should be presentable. Back in the day with certain yeshivas that, they were impeccable. The way they dressed, their shoes were shined, their bed was made. I mean, like common things. A person like this would go out, they'd string them up on a tree. It's like, forget about the name of the yeshiva. That's not even the point. That's how Ben Torah, that's how, a person who learns Torah, that's how they dress, that's how they look. I'm not saying like they fell in the mud and other things happen. Okay. I'm not talking about that. Someone goes out, this is the way they look. Seriously. Can't take that seriously. This person could be, a billion times smarter than I'll ever be in 10 lifetimes. Okay. Yeah. But you look like a slob. There's no way else to put it. You look totally unkempt. So how could you now go and give a class? Like, seriously. I mean, my Rebbe, okay, it's different. Big Torah personality. Before he went out, he made sure didn't have anything on his shirt, didn't have anything on his coat, whatever. Just make sure. Because, it could be liable for death penalty. Someone's that stat, you go out looking, get a spot in your shirt or something. Why death penalty? Because you got to be impeccable in general. The higher level the person is, the more they have to look. They have to look the part. Can't look like a schlep in my language. Can't look like a slob. We got to take you seriously. Sometimes I see people, I'm like, all right. Again, either, these things haven't been taught. Maybe. I give some people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's never been taught. Maybe. Or they don't care. These things I don't understand. I cannot care. Cleanliness is close to godliness. That's what we would say. If someone didn't get that message, you can say something. I remember someone telling me years ago, I think kids like dirty clothes, they smell. Like, how could a parent send them to school like that? Say maybe something wrong in the house. Okay. Cut them some slack. But if that's not the case, it's but they're still learning Torah, they're still doing the right thing, this and that. It's common sense. Common sense. It's I get, maybe common sense gone out the window. There are people, on the flip side, they dress up to kill. All these fragrances, okay, they smell the high heaven. To pick your poison. What would you rather? They smell like that or they smell worse? Again, if you're outside, like today here is 100 degrees, people are sweating. That's okay. That's the way it is. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about common sense. Should be common sense. Now, in secular society, that is something that is taught, to a certain extent. It should be taught at the young age. Kids should know. Again, without going into external so much, I think there are basic things. There are basic things. If I see people don't get the basics, like, try to explain to them. They're 50 years old. Try and explain to them. It's not nice to cough in someone's face. Cough when you don't cover your mouth. Well, most of the time I catch. What are they going to answer? It's person would have to figure out a way to be able to get, to say it in a way the person's going to be able to hear it. Also, but I don't think a lot of people seem to care. Should. Other people make comments here and there. Also bothers some people. Yeah. Remember, I was once at a kiddish somewhere. They bring out the kugel, they bring some other things, and they then brought out yet plates. Plates and forks. So I said to somebody, I said, it's only a matter of time. Someone. Other things you can take with your hand. Okay. It's rugulach, other things, cookies, whatever, fine. Like certain things you can't take with your hand. Your shami cookie you can't take with your hand in general. So I said, let's see how much time it takes if someone just grabs it with their hand because they don't want to wait for a fork or a plate. It doesn't take that long. It doesn't take that long. You're gonna say that's gross. Okay. Yeah. You're gonna be, you're gonna be that you're that hungry, that's the way it's gonna be. This is just gross. Yeah. You want to take another piece of cocoa after someone like stuck their hands in it, you know where their hands have been. Even if they're clean, so what? You say, oh, you say that's gross. It's gross. I'm not gonna say I haven't seen it. Seen it. Doesn't make you want to eat anything after that, but again, common sense is common sense. That's what I would think. Someone, that's what it is. Someone there mentions gossip causes your file to open also. Yeah, person speaks badly against someone else. It's not just the cause your file to be open, you transgress 30 prohibitions in one shot. Yeah, if a person's a habitual speaker and they don't care, they lose a portion of the world to come. So, not just to get your file open. Yeah, it's a lot worse. Speaking badly against someone else, yeah, it's a lot worse. It's a lot worse. When was Pirke Avos written? I don't know, good question. When was it written down? When was it written? It's written as part of the Mishna. That's what I thought. Yeah. It's part of the Mishna. All right. So whenever the Mishna was written between, I don't know, 190 before the Common Era, and 230 the Common Era, it was written the same time as the Mishna. It was really part of the Mishna. Right. It was really part of when the Mishna, whenever the Mishna was written down, it was the same time. All right. It was the same time. Someone asked to know, you have to know what to expect. It's hard to be a Jew. Okay. Yeah, but some people, even if they understand it's hard to be a Jew, they won't go through it. They don't go through all the hardship. They'll say, fine, it can be hard, shouldn't be this hard. Okay. Right? How hard does that have to be? How hard does that have to be? Well, some people say it doesn't have to be this hard. Okay. Some cases I would agree. In some cases I would say, yeah. In some places conversion can take 5 years. Even if you're already accepted by a rabbinical court. I think 5 years is a lot. The average is 2 years. Some places much more thorough. Okay. But a person has to realize, right, what you're in for. But some people feel they're in a possible situation. Or they're upset there are certain standards. They think that shouldn't apply to them. There's also a person that has kids at home. And let's say they don't want to convert. So they have to wait. Most rabbinical courts will make them wait until they're out of the house. That's what they'll do. I'm not saying every single one, but most of them will. Yeah. So you got to see. In not every case, the kid's going to be able to convert. Depends what's going on in the family. People with divorce, not so simple. If one of them is against, very much against. They're not so simple. Yeah, a based in a rabbinical court looks out what's in the best interest of the kid. Doesn't mean the kid is bad or not. That's not what it's talking about. Yeah. But what's in the best interest of the child? That's the question. So you're going to say, how do they define that? That's the way they're going to call it. not my call. Yeah, they're going to say, is it good for them? Parents going in the right direction? There any other outlying influence that might be bad that maybe they'll say no? Depends on the situation. Depends on the situation. But the Beis Din calls it the way they see it. That can be painful. Not going to say not. It for sure can be painful. Yeah. Any other questions? Somebody asked, 1 second. Is there a thing where a person is a mother that's supposed to be like a mother and teach them? I don't know. I don't know. It's a hard question. It's a hard question. Something that's that obvious. I would think it's that obvious. Yeah. I would think beyond the shadow of a doubt it's something they should know. Now, if they don't know, how are you going to say it in a way you don't offend them? Right? Again, giving rebuke, the Torah says at the end of that verse, Lo tisal of chait. You shouldn't bring yourself upon sin when you give rebuke. Doesn't mean you can't give rebuke. Right? So you have to think of a way how you're going to give it over in order that they won't be offended. And if they might be offended, maybe it doesn't matter. Right? Maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know. I think they're basic things people have to know. Definitely basic things people have to know. We're going to think, how are you going to give it over to someone where they're not going to feel like they're flattened by a pancake, but they understand the message? Yeah. Right? That's going to be the question. Someone here says failing is certain. Okay. Tshuva is offered. If one accepts tshuva, someone accepts repentance and still fails, and fails, should one refrain from conversion? Again, it depends. It depends. Someone asked me this question. Does this mean I shouldn't convert? Because I'm going through this, I'm going through that, I'm going through the other things. Does that mean I shouldn't convert? Doesn't necessarily mean that. It's a tremendous test. A person can fail many times, doesn't mean they're not worthy to convert. Right? It depends. It depends what it is. I think, part of the problem. I think part of the problem in general, is the fact that there's a level of frustration where people are just like fed up and they say, like, I've been going through this for so long, it's not fair I should have to wait any longer, or it's not fair I should be pushed off more. Again, it's not a question of what's fair, what's not fair. The Beis Din feels that's the right thing to do because they want to see certain things. And they have the right to do that. They absolutely have the right to do that. Now, a person can make the decision and say, well, I'm fed up, I'm not going to do it, because of this, that, and the other thing. Okay. Not everyone is made to convert. Right? That is true. Now, some people will rise to the challenge, other people will get broken by it. Right? I've seen both ways. There are people just relentless. They're not going to stop. Okay. Right? They won't stop. A person has to make that decision. Right? They have to make that decision. Absolutely have to make that decision. But a lot of it just comes out of frustration, which doesn't mean they're not fit to convert. I get people all the time, they flake in and out. They really want to convert, then they stop and they start again. And, it's evil inclination also. But again, it's anything else. You want, it's like Torah. Torah is a very hard thing to acquire. 3 things hard to acquire: Torah, Eretz Yisrael, and Olam Haba. Got to work hard. You got to fight for it. It has to be more important than anything. That's the only way. Someone asked, name three special sudas for Shabbos. There are three. One at night, one during the day, and the third meal. It's called Suda Shlishi, third meal. Those are the three meals. One at night and two during the day. Right? One in the morning or one in the early afternoon, depending, what time you pray or whatever. And one right before sundown. So those are the three meals. Right? Those are the three. They don't have, the only name, the only meal that has a name is the third meal. It's called Sudat Shlishi, or Shalosh Shudas, as it's called. The third meal. That's the third meal. That's the meal before sundown. That's the late afternoon meal. The other two meals don't have name. You have Sudas Shabbos. You have, the one Friday night, right? And Sudas Yom, which is the meal during the day, right? You got the meal at night, the meal during the day, and you got the third meal, right? Those are the three. Those are the three. Yeah. Any other questions? One second. Yeah, Sudas means meals, right? Right. But again, the third meal is called Shalosh, we call it Shalosh Sudas, but it means Shalosh Sudas, right? The third meal. That's what it means. That's the third meal. But the other two are they get the night meal and the day meal. They don't have specific names. They don't really have specific names. Yeah. Somebody asks, in Judaism is okay to advise younger men what's inappropriate if they are not taught. But avoid it because mother's supposed to prepare their sons for marriage. Yeah, can a person do that? They can. It's normally if they go to whatever, if they go to yeshiva, then they'll be prepared that way. But shouldn't the parents prepare the child? Yeah. But a lot of times, especially if it's a girl, that should have a private teacher, teach about the laws rather than the mother. It's probably better. Probably better in general. But can you teach young men? I don't know, but big leery to do that. Have men teach men, women teach women. Not the other way around. Yeah. Any other questions? I think you should go to rabbi knows. Yeah, probably very. Yeah, then probably should go to rabbi. It's true. That is true. Anytime you have a mixture of the sexes, speaking about, let's say things that have to do with whatever, coming of age, that type of thing. Yeah, you talk about the right people, not necessarily by someone of the opposite sex. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Any other questions? Somebody asks. One second. Like getting therapy for early trauma. That you can. Yeah, that you can try. Try and convince them if it's needed. If it's needed. The question is the person who's going to do it, are they going to be listened to? Is it going to be something the person can hear? Right? That would be the question. Right? If they ask, yeah. Yeah, why not? It's if they ask, would the person intervene? I don't know necessarily they should intervene. Right? Again, it would depend on the case. But if they would ask, yeah. Yeah. Then you could intervene. Yeah. And yeah, somebody mentioned about telling people, let's say, stop drinking so much, pray more. Yeah, these are things people coming of age, also. If they're learning, let's say, they get a lot of more stuff. They get a lot of ethics. It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing. Someone's going to be on top of them, in general. But can you encourage? You could. Yeah, that you could. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to stop here. I do this every Saturday, 2:30 Eastern Time, 9:30 Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Chaim Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com. Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos on Q&As, ethics for our fathers, Book of Leviticus. Anyone has any questions, you can send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBI, CHAIMCOFFMAN at